about the future and what it looks like. And so really what I want to do is to kind of present a challenge to you, and think of it like Survivor, right? Because if you don't do well in the game, you get voted off the island. Well, if you think about the future and what Warren said about using AI, if you don't embrace that and you don't develop the right mindset, that's the challenge. You're not going to do well in the future. You will rapidly, as an organization and even an individual, you will fade into obsolescence. That is simply the way it is. Okay. The future is coming at us so fast and technology is changing so rapidly. So, you know, the theme is you need to envision that, you need to transform to that, and you need to thrive. And if you do that, you can thrive. And you have to architect your organization for continuous transformation. Down. Or is it this one? Let's try that. Here you go. Sure, no, just here. There you go. I guess just get hit it. Or just use this. Use the wheel. Gotcha. Okay. Great. Thank you. Okay. So as Warren said, there's my background. I kind of already went through all of that. So I've been doing this stuff for a while. I wrote my first computer program in 1979 on this incredible computer called the IBM 370. That thing had 1 megabyte of RAM, 1 whole megabyte. Right? Think about that. Like, what would you ever do with all that memory? Oh, and don't forget the two 300 megabyte hard disk platters that look like a couple of washing machines, you know, sitting side by side. That was your primary and your backup data storage. 300 megabytes each. Unbelievable. Like, you know, couldn't even imagine how much storage that was. So what I want to do is present you a bionic challenge today, right? And the challenge is kind of like you were just saying, Warren, is to shift your perspective. Change your perspective to think in terms of the Bionic Enterprise, and I'll teach you what that means, right? Otherwise, the future looks dim if you're not going to do that. So AI is coming at us, right? And you need to change your perspective to adopt AI. I don't think we should start thinking about it. If you're just starting to think about it, you could even argue that it's a little bit too late. You've got some catching up to do. I think a lot of you here already know, the general public knows that AI will take something that might take days, weeks, or months and reduce it down to minutes or seconds, right? That's not just some little 10% improvement, you know, like let's increase, you know, our productivity by 10%. Ooh, wow, that's inspiring, right? We're talking about 10x type improvements, right? You need to think 10x, not 10%. You need to be thinking about not just doing the same things better and faster, but even doing different things. That's what transformation is, okay? So, you know, AI, as it says there, can augment humans to do a lot of different things. You know, it doesn't do creative things. Like AI is not truly creative in the sense that it creates something out of nothing like people do. But the lines are getting kind of blurry. So, you know, it's not going to be long before it does that. But the key is to change your perspective and your way of thinking. So I want to give you some ideas on how to go about that. So let's go back for a minute to 2009, right? What matters about 2009? Well, a couple of interesting events, you know, that happened fine. That's when Bitcoin was launched, so that's kind of transformative. And that's when that famous landing in the Hudson, if anybody remembers that, took place. You know, it's pretty radical. So a launch and a landing. But there's something else that happened there too that I want to talk about today. And I hope that event or that story that I'm going to share with you will actually kind of stick with you a little bit and make you think, you know, as you go about doing your systems engineering, modeling your systems and so forth. And I hope that what I share today will help to kind of inform and reform the way you think to change your current paradigm, because the event that happened in 2009 is the reason, you know, that I'm here today. So a couple of years ago, I found this quote, which I thought was really cool. It's really simple. You know, authors have a way with words, right? And I love the way that this author put that together. Creativity, the power to connect the seemingly unconnected. So look at that phrase, the word power, right? He talks about it like, you know, it's the choice of words there, right? He didn't say the ability. Now that's kind of bland, right? The ability to connect the seemingly unconnected. He called it the power, like it's some sort of a superpower. So think about that for a second, because people usually think of creativity as some kind of superpower, even though, it's a skill that you can develop. And that should speak to everybody here because everybody here is a problem solver. You're all designers, you're all engineers, you're all architects, you're all modelers. And, the engineering V is our friend, right? We all kind of live and die by that. Sometimes we approach it in an agile way. Sometimes we do it in a waterfall, the old-fashioned waterfall way of doing things, right? Or a combination. But at the heart of all of that, of everything we're doing from, the top side over to the other top side, it's about creativity. You're trying to come up with creative solutions to whatever problems that you're encountering in the V. And, creative thinking, if you start looking at some of these Gartner studies and you see those little magic quadrants and you look at what are the skills for 2030 and beyond, what's up in that top right quadrant, creative thinking and systems thinking and creative problem solving are like the top skills. Because AI is going to be able to do and already is doing a lot of the other things that we typically think of in terms of grunt work and time-consuming tasks and things like that, because you all are busy automating that stuff. And so what's left for us? There's plenty, right? That's just a power tool. So that's a crucial skill set for the 21st century. So there is an explosion going on, right? It's all around us, and we've all been part of that. And AI, like I said, is not really creating; it's synthesizing currently. Okay, it's not conscious. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have intent. It doesn't have desire. Those are all human traits, okay? But it's really good at taking a lot of information together that was provided by humans and synthesizing that into a useful form. So, the key is we're driven by one set of characteristics as humans. AI is driven by, like it says, algorithms, statistical methods, things like that. And we try to approximate human behavior with AI, but it's that drive that we have that it doesn't. Now, at some point, yeah, it may get to that point where it's very very much similar to us. So AI can definitely empower people, and it can empower us with creative things. Like I use AI techniques, and I'm sure all of you, there are features that are in tools I use for editing music, editing videos, right, and doing music arrangements and things like that. And so it's like having an intelligent assistant with you, but I'm the one that's doing the real work. I'm the one that's doing that has the vision of what I want to create. The AI is there to empower me, okay? It's a creative tool, whether it's engineering or music. But doing those things is not really transformation. You're really achieving operational efficiency, which is great because you need to do that. We still have to have operational efficiency. We have to do what we're doing more efficiently, okay? But while we're doing that, like I said, we want to look at like 10x transformation of what we're doing. And that's when you start to do new things altogether that you couldn't envision. So I was in San Antonio in 2009, and I had a chance to go see the Alamo. That's not the actual one, that's a replica somewhere outside San Antonio. And, I was a history buff, so I thought, oh man, that'd be really cool to go see that. But I didn't. So was that like a missed opportunity? Probably not, right? I was there with some colleagues and stuff, but I did not go to the Alamo because I chose to go sort of do what the author says, connect the seemingly unconnected. All right, so we'll come back to the Alamo in a minute, though. Kind of plays into what happened. So the reason I was in San Antonio was for the 2009 DoD Enterprise Architecture Conference. And we had just finished presenting the Marine Corps Enterprise Architecture. We had about 650 people, something like that. Big group, right? All DoD and contractors and everyone. And we presented the Marine Corps EA. And, when we built it, we weren't really focused on trying to make sure we built perfect OB2s and DODAC and the perfect SB1s and so forth and follow all the rules in the book. We were focused on building that architecture so that the views and the data and the dashboards would resonate with the stakeholders, like the CIO of the Marine Corps. And we wanted to make sure that it would make sense to them. Kind of like what Warren said, if a PM or an executive type came along to look at your at your work, your models, your architecture, would it make any sense to them? Would it tell them a story? Would it resonate? And we thought, you know what, the typical DODAP views, I mean, they serve a very important role, and that's great for the sort of the engineering part of the food chain, but for the upper part of the food chain, you know, when they see you walking in with, you know, OB2s, one Marine that I work with says they'll just throw up on their shoes, or on your shoes, I should say. They don't want to see that, right? I don't care about your SV6. Like, tell me what it's telling me. What does it actually mean? So we had finished the presentation, and it was kind of funny because ironically the host of the conference was a well-known author whose name I shall protect, of several books on how to do perfect DODAF, right? You know, by the book, literally, because he wrote the book on how to do perfect DODAF. And yet here we were showing all this fit for purpose custom stuff. So when we finished the briefing, and I was with the chief architect of the Marine Corps at the time, and he said, "Thank you very much for your fit for purpose views." Like that was some sort of slight, you know, like that there was some sort of stigma, like that's not really real DODAF, but thanks for coming, guys, right? You know, like fit for purpose is part of DODAF, if you're familiar with it, you know, more like the black sheep part of DODAF, I suppose. So, but back to the Alamo. So my wife's from Texas, so she gets a little cringy when you talk about the Alamo or about some of Texas's history, because she's just like so stubborn back then. You know, not one of Texas's finer moments, right? And there were several stories. We recently watched a series called Texas Rising, I think, and there were several situations leading up to the Alamo where there were different colonels and she went to the elementary school named after one of them, excuse me, and you know, they refused to follow orders. They were being traditional stubborn Texans, which I accuse her of all the time, and she argues that she's not. You know, and so you know, they refused to leave when they got orders from General Houston, Sam Houston, Houston's named after, and they were wiped out. The same thing with the folks that were there at the Alamo. They waited too late. They were trapped. They were wiped out. There were 3 different incidents. That was just the most recent one. But what happened there was that a paradigm shift occurred. The actual Alamo itself, the event, the battle, was a catalyst for a paradigm shift, because what it was about was getting to independent rule for the Texans, right? They wanted to separate from Mexico and Santa Anna. It was very oppressive rule at the time, if you read some of that history, and they wanted to be independent. So I skipped the tour. I said, you know, I'd like to go do that, but some of my colleagues and chief architect, you know, and so they went off to dinner and they went off to a tour of the Alamo that evening after, you know, the first night of the conference. The reason I skipped it, because I had this idea for a book. I was going to write the perfect enterprise architecture cookbook. It was going to talk about the way to do the perfect diagrams and do the perfect analysis and build a perfect set of portfolio views and link all your system models together. And it was just going to be perfect, perfect, perfect. And then I thought about that and I thought, well, wait a minute, there's like 1,000 of those on Amazon at the time. I'm sure there's a couple more by now. So then I thought, you know, what's the point in that? Why would I write that? How would that even contribute anything? I mean, that's just one screenshot of some of the books on enterprise architecture and how to do it. So I skipped that idea and I started thinking about, you know, some of my past, my career, things that I had done, what some of my motivations and interests were. So Jerry, where's Jerry? There you go. That's my bald head. That's where I was sitting, you know, January 86.
I had hair.
Did you? I have other pictures that prove that I had hair once, you know, but in that particular, that one was in 98, but that wasn't during Challenger. So that was a few years later. So that was where I was working on shuttle missions and things like that up at Goddard Space Flight Center. But what I did that evening was I opened up a mind map tool, and I started putting pieces together. As you can see a little bit of it there. I know you can't really read it. And it was about enterprise architecture, and I was putting ideas and thoughts and interests and inspirations and so forth together. And, you know, I started, instead of thinking about like how to model things, you know, like the perfect EA cookbook, I started thinking in terms of, wait, let's not think about how to model. Let me think about what we're modeling. I started thinking about the future. You know, since a kid, I watched the original Star Trek TV series and you know, sci-fi type shows. So the future was always interesting and things they could do in the future, right? So I started thinking about the trends that would, you know, that are coming together in technology and so forth. So while my colleagues, you know, went off to dinner and proceeded to get lost on their way back in the streets of San Antonio, I'm up in my room and I decided to order room service and get started. So I opened up the tool. Notice this guy though, he's got like food in both hands, so I'm not sure how you can get much accomplished with the keyboard that way. But I started thinking about, you know, my background as an enterprise architect. I was thinking about my work as a process engineer, doing process modeling, you know, like mission processes for shuttle missions and things. Systems engineering, you know, I had to take this 13-week, I don't know if you took that one or not, the NASA system engineering course. It was like 13 weeks long. It was like freaking boot camp, you know, and you had to go through that. And then at some point later, you had to go through, I forget the exact name, but you were like what they call a basic trained, what do you call, flight controller. Not that I was one, but you had to go through the course. And that was like 12 or 13 weeks too. So you learn a lot there. And, you know, my thing was software engineering. And so I started putting these pieces together and thinking of ideas. Like I said, I was thinking about, you know, kind of my childhood, right? The thing that got me interested in computer science in the first place was the movie 2001 Space Odyssey. And if you're familiar with the HAL 9000 computer that took over the ship, started killing off the crew, the spaceship, because it malfunctioned. So that's why we're going to validate our AI, right? We don't want it to malfunction. And it started shutting off different life support systems, and it started shutting, you know, taking people out of the spacecraft, you know, they get into this like, you know, vestibule, and then it would open it up and they'd be exposed to outer space. Okay, got rid of that crew member, you know, only 4 more to go. So it was killing off the crew members. And the story was about the idea of AI, but then it malfunctioned. But it was this intelligent computer. And I was fascinated by that. And that won the Academy Award for like 1969, right? For Best Picture, I think it was. So, you know, that one got me interested in computer science, but then I also started thinking about other things. And how many of you remember the $6 Million Man? Anybody with gray hair in here? Yep, there you go. So I don't have to explain that one to you. But you know, that was about the Bionic Man, and then the spin-off show, The Bionic Woman. And I started thinking about, you know, things like Japan's Society 5.0. So there's these ideas. And so, you know, that's not actually those characters there, that's just a generated image. But you had you know, the astronaut Steve Austin, and he suffered a near fatal crash. And it was based on a true story. And he lost, you know, an arm, an eye, and both legs. And they were replaced with bionic limbs. Okay. And, you know, the key thing there in the story, though, and then his fiancee had a similar near fatal accident. So they made her bionic too, because, you know, you had to have a partner, right? So they could run 65 or more miles an hour. They could pick up the front end of a pickup truck with one arm, right? You could do all this superhuman type stuff. But the key thing was that they had, and we still can't do this today, they had fused, the doctors in the show, the technology, like the arm, to their human anatomy. It wasn't just like some bolt-on thing, you know, that's separate. It was part of them now, right? It was indistinguishable from, you know, their real legs or whatever, except for what you could do with it. So it created a new normal for them and a new paradigm, which they had to adjust to, just like we're having to adjust today. So you think about that, the fusion of that technology with the human activities, and every activity they would perform could be, you know, improved upon, you know, faster, better, and all that kind of thing. And so that was it. That was the connection. Because I thought, well, wait a minute, what if you had that same concept, you know, and you started using AI methods for transforming enterprise transformation, and, you know, you had artificial intelligence and bionic technologies and so forth, and enhancing enterprise abilities. the abilities of the enterprise and the people in it, in the same way that the limbs, right, the bionic arms and legs and eye and ear could transform the humans. So I use that story as sort of a metaphor. And that was where the idea of the Bionic Enterprise came from. That's where it was born. So I was sitting there with food in both hands in the hotel room, stuffing my face. I managed to type a few key things. It came up with that concept. So to think about what's happening today, the whole planet is being powered by AI. It is everywhere. It's even in places we don't even really think of it. We're not even necessarily conscious of it. Okay, we are in a paradigm shift. And AI and the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, we talk about Internet of Things and all those other related technologies, it's everywhere and it's changing, any of you use it in really small ways and in really big ways and everything in between. It's something as small as you pull up your iPhone and the little yellow box appears because it says, oh, I recognize that as a human face, and there's another human face, and so it'll focus on those faces, right? That's AI, that's image recognition, right? That's called visual cognition. So there's endless use cases for it. Everything is AI powered. I love that cartoon. Sell me this pen. It's AI powered. You need this. I'll take 5,000 of them. Every company right now, right? They've got some product that's AI powered. Everybody's on the AI bandwagon. Stole that off of LinkedIn recently or Facebook recently. So there are thousands of applications, and that's great, right? We're getting better products. We can do more with them. They're more friendly, they're more useful. Think about, you go back and you've seen some of the old black and white, YouTube clips of like the 50s when they had all the, 40s and 50s after the World War II, all these home appliances started coming out. That was huge, dishwashers, and washing machines for clothes. Like you don't have to use the scrubber board thing anymore like the old days, and you could throw all the dishes in this machine and hit a button and it'll wash them. Blenders and all the electric appliances that transformed the kitchen, right? Well, the AI is transforming everything and it's fusing with us, in very kind of intimate ways that, some conscious and some unconscious, we don't even necessarily notice. So let's talk about what a bionic enterprise is. It is ultimately powered by bionic agents that learn and they collaborate and they work together to achieve goals of different sizes. And the thing that's important to realize, though, is when we talk about transforming, we're not talking about just merely, saying we're going to upgrade our technology stack. That's our goal for 2025. We're upgrading the technology stack of the company. Ooh, wow, I'm so inspired. We're going to go from version 1.2 to 2.0 of something, like that's not transformation. That's called a tech refresh. Okay, and that's great. You have to do those things, but you're not transforming. So let's just separate those two and make sure we understand the difference between improving your current efficiencies, but really trying to transform to something new, something that is second order change. First order change is like you were saying, Warren, it's evolutionary, not revolutionary. Second order change is revolutionary. It's that 10x thing I'm talking about. The 10% thing, that's your first order change. You certainly want to get more efficient with what you're doing, but you want to leapfrog ahead of that and actually get into transformation. But here's the trick. It's a bit of a paradox, right? Like, wait a minute. So you're saying I got to keep doing what I'm doing and get better at it. And at the same time, I need to be thinking 10x about doing something entirely new, right? To kind of stay ahead of the competition or the adversaries or whatever. So I got to do that. Got it. Okay. So I got to think about the future. I got to think about the present. Oh, and I got to think about that transformation and doing it in a continuous way, never ending. Right? What could possibly go wrong, right? Piece of cake. So, that's the challenge, right? Is juggling all those balls. But AI is everywhere. It's in businesses. It's in the military, right? They're using it big time. I mean, that's a matter of survival. You want to talk about survivor bionic enterprise? If we don't figure it out, our adversaries already are. Okay, and they're not worried about AI ethics. DoD came out 2 years ago, whatever. I mentioned it in my big book, the 800-page book. they came out with the, I forget what they called it, but it was, ethics in AI thing. It was a nicely written, maybe 30-page kind of a little white paper sort of thing. And these are our principles for ethics in AI. Okay, that's cool. But the problem, and I mentioned this in my book, the problem with that document, Beijing and Moscow don't have documents like that. They don't give a rip. They're going to do what they have to do, right? As a martial artist, I looked at that and I thought, there are types of martial artists that are going to teach you the perfect forms and the perfect kata, and they're going to talk in terms of like rules, like tournament rules. You can't strike here, you can't strike there, you can't do this, you can't do that. The very things you're allowed to do in a tournament, you would never want to do on the street, and vice versa. The very things you would want to do on the street are not allowed in a tournament. All right. On the street, if you are assaulted and you are attacked, it is about survival. It's about getting home that night. Okay, and having trained many federal agents and local law enforcement and military, they resonate with it, or that resonates with them, right? So when you talk about ethics in AI, that's important, I get it, but in a battlefield sense, that is kind of a different story. That's a whole different conversation to have there, but it's definitely an important one to have, in terms of like human in the loop, things like that. All right, so AI is everywhere. Got it, right? But something was missing. Okay, we got all these applications everywhere. I kind of like to refer to them as point solutions. So you got all this stuff everywhere. It's all cool. It's exploding, billions of use cases. I just read last week that since like February of this year, maybe January, 30,000 new AI tools have been released in the marketplace. 30,000. Don't even have time to read through the list. Too busy just using the handful of we're using. Think about that explosion and the use cases for that. So you definitely have to get a handle on it, but the problem is, and you mentioned this, Warren, don't get so caught up in the tools. You're missing the bigger picture, okay? So the bigger picture is a framework, a way to put this stuff together, right? And take all the technologies, take all the use cases, and it's not about, we need PhDs, we need these super bright people to come up with the latest next AI algorithm that does something better. Okay, that's how you're going to continue to improve, okay? But what you also have to look at is you have to zoom back and look at it from a kind of a framework perspective, an enterprise perspective, a holistic way of looking at your enterprise. So, as an enterprise architect, I'm saying, yes, do your system engineering, but like Warren said, look at the whole system. Except the part he didn't say is that what I'm saying is look at the enterprise as the system, not your customer relationship management, platform. Yeah, that's a system, but look at the whole enterprise. Take that into context. So, this picture right here, that's not a framework. Okay, that's just a nice little infographic, useful, that just kind of gives you a quick visual inventory of different tools, some of those 30,000, right, that fit into these different categories. And that's important. You need to be able to kind of understand the tool landscape, but you really need to understand your enterprise landscape. What is it made up of and what's driving it, okay? So the framework has three pieces. So you think about like DODAP for 1 second. Everybody's familiar with it. You've got, operational views, you've got systems views. Operational views focus on the human part of the enterprise. System views focus on the technology side. And you kind of have service views in the middle, and you got capability views, and they all matter, right? And they're all good. So when you're looking at a Bionic Enterprise, you're looking at an enterprise, you have three perspectives, right? This is the simplistic view of it. You have the human side, everything about the organization and its people. Goals, vision, strategy, all the buzzwords you see there in the box. You have the technology side of it. Can't escape that, right? All these particular technologies that kind of fit the description of a Bionic Enterprise and support that. Animated by AI. Okay, that's like the new oil for the 25th century. And then you have, remember, the idea of a bionic person where they fused the arms and legs to them. They didn't just attach them, they fuse it with them. Think of that differently. Instead of connecting, it's fusing. It's making it one, right? The person within the organization and their technology and what they use to do their work in the across the organization, making it one. Developing closer partnership with the technology. That's the fusion perspective, and that's where you get into the whole transformation, the architecture, the things you see listed there. And the stuff on the left are kind of the different levels of stakeholders. So what would the future look like? Back to, kind of stargazing a little bit, right? We're getting into hybrid computers. This is stuff that's already happening. This isn't 20 years out, okay? We're getting into quantum computing. Those are real things now. We're getting into wetware, biological computers that have, silicon chips, but they can have biological elements inserted within them. I mean, how weird is that? That's a hybrid kind of machine. We have advanced intelligent materials being developed more all the time, right? So materials becoming intelligent. My jacket is intelligent. It probably adjusts the temperature to keep me from overheating or getting too cold. Things like that. Nano machines, some of the simulations that out at NASA Ames Research Center that they're doing on some of those supercomputers are simulating nano machines that actually get down at that level and perform functions. And what we're doing is there was a term called AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. They haven't been using that term for a while. It's been a little while. I mean, yes, it will get to that point, but really, they kind of leapfrogged over that, all the big tech leaders, and they talk about artificial superintelligence, whatever that is, right? And at some point, I talk about this in the book, getting to a point where we talk about synthetic consciousness. I refer to it as synthetic intelligence, whether it's super or not. Synthetic just means it's artificial is like it's not real intelligence. No, we're getting to where we have real intelligence. It's just synthetic. It's not biological. It's not organic like we are. Okay, so call it synthetic. And if the machine is synthetic, then if it develops consciousness, then that becomes synthetic. We're not real far from that point. So a bionic enterprise has these kind of characteristics. It's certainly interactive. It has to be immersive. Augmented reality, virtual reality, visual recognition, gesture recognition, human traits, right? The same kind of senses. It's got to be intelligent, of course. It has to be adaptive. It's got to adapt to, changes in its environment and its ecosystem. It's got to be everywhere. You got to be able to access it everywhere, ubiquitous. It's got to be goal directed, and it's got to be elastic, right? So those are some of the key characteristics. So think about it. Doctors, you hear this in TV commercials a lot. Come to our hospital, right? Because hospitals are big business. Come to our hospital. We have an integrated care team of specialists that will treat you as a whole person, from head to toe. We're not just going to, fix your broken elbow, or, whatever, take your gallbladder out and call it a day, right? We're going to look at your whole being and everything. Okay, that's cool. Got it. You should look at the whole person. But we don't do that in organizations very often. Only the organizations at the top of the pyramid do that. They take that holistic view. And the tech folks, notice you got the nerd sitting there, and he's doing his thing. And by the way, you should always validate AI because the results you get from this generated image, because there's a guy in there that has 3 hands. I don't know if anybody picked up on that. It's like this third guy or I guess it's a woman there, I can't tell, with the glasses. The third one up on the right-hand side, pretty sure one of them has 3 hands. So, that's kind of interesting, right? Maybe that's part of the future. They bolted an arm on even though she didn't really need it. But but the problem is that a lot of organizations do not exercise and use visionary leadership. Without that, without looking at the future, without thinking outside the box, without thinking beyond today, you won't have that top level support you need to do the really cool tech stuff. And yet, the people that are thinking often creatively and that do have the tech knowledge and capability to achieve that vision, they're usually the ones that get shoved off into the corner and will slide a pizza under the door, but just don't bother us. Just do the stuff that you do. They have to be part of that. They have to be part of shaping that story and that vision. for that organization, so that when the CEO announces, we're going to transform the organization, we're going to upgrade from Oracle 9i to Oracle 10. Wow. You know, like, really? That's all you got? So you wonder why so many IT projects fail, right? The organization itself is not integrated. So this is the more detailed view of the framework. You've seen the three perspectives. This shows you the pieces within it. It's really a framework of frameworks, right? You get into that top layer, the vision and characteristics we just saw. There is a creativity maturity model. Now you can use a different one if you want, but the point is that creativity is something that needs to be instilled across the organization, not just this one team over here. You guys get to be the cool creative ones. Everybody else is going to be, just clueless, but you'll tell them what to do. Like, that doesn't work, right? You want to instill, innovation, creativity. That needs to be the mandate, the expectation across an organization. You're going to get anywhere, but it has to be supported by visionary leadership. And so there's a maturity model for how to grow and mature visionary leadership. There's a transformation and a fusion framework, and there's the other elements that you see here. But what you're really trying to do is, with the technologies and the bionic agents, and through the bionic digital platform that you're going to build in your organization, you are trying to achieve bionic effects. Wait, so what are those? Well, remember the $6 million man, right? He can run 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, depending on how scared he is, how many people are shooting at him. He can pick up a car, he can take a football and throw it 3.5 miles. So you have to think about the bionic effects you're trying to achieve. So here's really kind of what it is. The Bionic Enterprise framework looks at the whole organization, the entire enterprise, like it's one big AI-driven agent, because it is. It has to be. And it can sense its environment. It has persistence. It has continuity. It has all these important characteristics. It can learn. It can adapt. It's there to integrate everybody and everything. The enterprise itself is a killer app. And that includes the people. It's not just the technology. Think about that. So really the key, if that's what it is, then the key to the future is fusing those bionic technologies. They're driven by AI, right? They're all connected. They're all infused with the AI capability. And you're fusing that with human activity at intimate levels, like I said. And what you're trying to achieve is that sort of superhuman type performance, right? Bionic level performance, not 10% improvements, 10x type improvements and abilities. So really, what you have is that the enterprise of the future is not going to build killer apps like you think of. You're trying to structure it so that the enterprise of the future becomes the killer app. Think of the whole enterprise as a system, right? It needs to be engineered. I recently put an article, you can see the date, just a couple of weeks ago, on LinkedIn, part of a series I'm doing. And it talks about agents, and we need agents. We have to have them. They have to develop. The technology needs to keep maturing. But building agents is not how you're going to create real lasting value. Okay, it's about building the enterprise, right? And unfortunately, here's one of the dangers, which is where fear comes in. If I can build just the right number of agents to do the right things, I can get rid of a lot of people this way. Man, think of all the people I can get rid of. Yeah, this agent could get rid of 20 people. That one could get rid of 15. Man, that's awesome. Look at all the huge cuts I could make. Wait, hold on. The point is not to get rid of people. The point is to empower the people. So imagine you've got just a couple of people working with these agents. Sure, they're going to be more productive, but imagine if all the people that you think you're replacing were trained and upskilled and their jobs redefined so that they're using those agents and those tools. Now you have, would you rather have 2 people running these agent applications, or would you rather have 55 people running all of that and all the productivity and enhancement that comes out of that? Right? It's a force multiplier for sure, but that doesn't mean you need to reduce the force necessarily. Sometimes it's necessary. But the key thing and part of the framework is the bionic design process is a human-centric approach. So you're not just looking at automating tasks, you're looking at how to achieve new human potential. So probably figured out by now that I'm not here to talk about a specific tool or a specific technique for modeling, how to build the perfect diagrams. The focus is the reason that we have to advance is because the technology is changing so rapidly, the business models, the cycle times, right? Business cycles, military cycles, everything is speeding up, right? The rate of change is accelerating. And that's why it has to be architected for continuous transformation, so that you're envisioning that future. So let's kind of go back a little bit to what Warren was talking about. You have your model-based systems engineering, so you're definitely thinking systems at the systems level. But think about the enterprise, okay? It's the future is the ecosystem that y'all are working in, that you're doing models, that you're developing systems and simulations for. The future is an ecosystem. So think of it like that. I mean, Shakespeare referred to the undiscovered country. If you've heard that phrase before, what he was talking about was, the unknown of the afterlife, the fear of like, well, what's after death, and he called that the undiscovered country. But in the same sense, in this context, the future is the undiscovered country. And yeah, it's scary, but it's also exhilarating. So the survivor challenge, if you will, for your organization or the customers that you support is to shift your perspective, to start to think like that. Don't get so bogged down into the weeds that you're only thinking about your system and does it interface correctly with that. You need to have be cognizant of the greater enterprise and look at that as the whole system. Okay, consider the paradigm that you're operating in right now. So John Zotman, hopefully a few of you have heard of him. He's the guy that invented enterprise architecture back in 1987. I actually got to teach a few courses for him, as a guest instructor and all that. And I was really, really lucky to have a conversation with him, and he agreed very graciously to write the foreword for the two books. It's the same foreword for both books, because it's really just two versions of the same book. And one of his quotes was that, we focus too much on, building systems, which we do. I mean, the enterprise is made up of them, but we're not engineering the enterprise as a holistic unit, okay, as a holistic entity. So again, it's about shift your perspective, step back from the systems. What is your current operating paradigm? And, those systems are there, but they're a response to a need. What was that need that system is a response to? So that means you need to have that understanding of the paradigm of the enterprise. So what was the genesis of that system? Why do we need it in the first place? Or even do we need it? Okay. And, because the enterprise needs architecting too. It's a system. Okay. We're talking about the intelligent society of the future. That's like the subtitle of my book, right? We're architecting an intelligent future. Well, then let's architect it. Let's not just, piecemeal it one system at a time. So look at the whole thing. So what does that look like? Again, kind of covered this. It's AI driven with bionic agents that are micro learning machines. And they all have, Mario knows this, the AI team, they all have particular functions and roles and responsibilities. And what you're doing is you're building communities of cooperating agents, because they're going to evolve with or without us. Okay, not just little isolated functions like I was talking about earlier, does this one little cool trick and that cool trick and this cool trick, but an integrated bionic digital platform for your entire enterprise that's there to achieve bionic effects by partnering with you, not replacing, but partnering with you. And that's why they call, this year, 25, thousands of articles calling it the year of the agent. You've heard the term agentic AI. It's kind of a weird name. I'm not crazy about it, but I get it. But agents are getting, the airtime that they need. And it's interesting because on Space Shuttle, we built the second AI system. There was one built at Johnson Space Center called INCOM, essentially. They didn't really name it, but it was supporting integrated communications. And they created a programming language called CLIPS, C Language Inference Processing System. Then they taught my team over at Goddard Space Flight Center. We built another AI-based, rule-based system. This is 1985. Okay, AI has been around for a while, right? And then after that, at one point I'm at FAA and I'm working on a system called SmartFlow with Dr. Andrew Kornecki from Embry-Riddle University, an aeronautical computer science guy. And SmartFlow was an agent-based AI-driven system. There was an agent for each of the 20 pacing airports in the U.S. There was a monitor agent that would monitor the environment. There was an evaluation agent that would determine if there were problems like bottlenecks occurring. There was a recommendation agent, there was an analysis agent, and so forth, and an interface agent. And these agents had specific rule bases. They had like knowledge within them, and that they were expected to apply in this kind of loop fashion. So this agent-oriented development has been around a long time. It's just now becoming a popular, buzzword. But we're really talking about fusing with bionic technologies with human activity, like the $6 million man that we've already talked about, to get that super level performance. And when that, if you look at the TV show, it was a good paradigm for the Bionic Enterprise, because that created a new paradigm for him, right? It was his new normal. He had to adjust to that and what he could do now versus what he couldn't do before. So it was a new personal paradigm because he now had a new, very intimate connection with the technology. I mean, it was part of him, right? You couldn't just like put it on the nightstand when he went to bed at night. It was with him, part of him continuously. And I like in the forward what Zachman said. He said it's like the perfect metaphor, the $6 million man or the bionic man. It's the perfect metaphor for what we need to do with organizations to work harmoniously with our technology. So imagine that. So think about what the $6 million man is about. Think about doing that across an organization, right? And achieving that with all the individuals in all their roles and responsibilities in every corner of the enterprise. You've got your employees, your digital platform, that's going to give you bionic effects, okay? Driving the whole organization. But it takes that creativity and visionary leadership. Challenge the existing paradigm, think differently, embrace the change. If you don't, it's going to happen with or without you. And bionic design principles, which we don't have time to get into. So, what are you building? Right? What are the trends and technologies and business models that are converging to define your future? How is that changing for you? Like I said, either you, your company, your organization, or your clients. You have to look at that. That's part of being authentic with your customers and being a true problem solver, as opposed to, where you go into the doctor and they're like, okay, here's a prescription for this. They're not really looking at the whole situation. You're just saying, hey, I got a sore throat. Okay, here's some antibiotics, right? You're not looking for a Band-Aid. You're trying to understand the enterprise and help them transform it. That is the job of an engineer. That is the job of an architect, is to help transform the organization. So guess what? The AI genie is out of the bottle, right? We are never going back. It is not changing. We're not going back to the old ways. It's changing rapidly. Nothing's ever going to be the same. We've gone through, if you look at the history of AI over the decades, going back to the 50s even, it's gone through several AI renaissances and several AI winters. Back in the 80s, the Japanese had a project, I forgot what it was called, but by the end of this 10-year thing, I mean, they set a deadline. They're like, by 1990, we are going to have true artificial intelligence across our society. That was the precursor to Society 5.0. Okay. And, the whole country, all the companies, the government, they were all on board with this. They all raced into it, and they kind of slammed into it like a brick wall, because they realized you can't put innovation, and discovery on a timeline. It's going to happen when it happens. You can push in that direction, but you can't set a date for it. Okay. So they kind of made that adjustment. So anybody recognize this? I know there's a few in here. I managed to get a picture of that a few months before our new receptionist wiped it out and started putting like really cute little inspirational quotes on the whiteboard outside my office. But, think about that. I had that on the whiteboard outside my office for quite a while, and I got mocked a lot by it. I won't mention any names, Mario, but all of you actually. I got teased, like, come on, it's so cheesy, right? And in the past couple of weeks, now that everybody's just like, and that was like, 9 months ago maybe. In the past few weeks, now that everybody's kind of like, it's creeping in and they're using it and they're finding more uses and using it for different things, little things and big things, all of a sudden they're coming around like, one time I'm sitting at home, since we all got to work at home a lot during COVID, and 2 years ago maybe, and I'm at my desk and I'm working, and I hear my wife in the kitchen and my 22-year-old daughter, and she goes in and she asks my wife something. She says, "Hey mom, blah 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 blah." I don't even know what the question was. And I expected her to say, "I don't know, Sammy, go ask dad," right? Usual response. Do you know what her response was? "I don't know, Sammy, did you ask ChatGPT?" And the more that people find out uses for it, the more they realize, when you have questions, it can come up with answers. Maybe not always the perfect ones. So step back from your daily, engineering and all of that, and look at the capability gap your system is filling, and look at the vision for your enterprise, right? Because the question is, are you building an integrated enterprise, or are you building a bunch of disintegrated stovepipes? Okay. So I've used the word paradigm a lot. So what is a paradigm shift? That's it at the top there. It's the recognition that a new reality exists. We're in a new reality. So figure out what the rules are, what it means, and how to get on top of that. Okay. Because your system, if you're talking about system engineering, is part of that paradigm. These are some of the key kind of variables, if you want to think of it like that, that describe a paradigm. You talk about your current, operating paradigm, but you want to be looking at, studying that, modeling that, and keeping it up to date, because if it changes, what if something changes, the culture of the organization changes some way? That's part of your paradigm. That's going to have an impact. What if the rules, legislation, policy, or just, corporate policy, what if that changes? What if the goals change? What if the values of the organization change in some way from whatever they were to whatever they might be, right? If there's change occurring in any of these or multiple of these, then you're beginning to move into a new paradigm, and you need to adjust for that, and you need to really have some awareness and consciousness of it. But at the same time, the organizations that are like leading the charge, they don't just respond to paradigm shifts, they're causing paradigm shifts. They're planning it. Okay. So it's really about how well do you understand the enterprise? How well do your systems improve the user experience? Is it just a collection of functions? And are you using the 3 types of capital for the 21st century? And these are the 3 types of new capital. You talk about, like human capital and that type of thing, or financial capital. You've got cognitive, behavioral, and network. Those are important. That's what your organization knows how to do. So how can your AI become smarter? Well, the organization tells it what it does, and it learns what the organization does. Behavioral capital is more external facing, right? It's what your customers, your adversaries, your partners do, right? You need to understand that. So internal, external, and then network capital is really how you locate, connect with, and interface with the organization. Okay, so we have to supervise our AI, right? We're getting to a point where we're working with teams of agents. We're working with human AI hybrid teams now. So we have to keep track of like, well, wait, what's my job versus the job of the agent? Okay, so focus on your vision, and look at the enterprise of the future in this way. It's becoming hyper-connected. As it becomes hyper-connected, it becomes hyper-aware. As it becomes hyper-aware and hyper-converged, it has the ability to start to become hyper-intelligent. Okay, so here's the thing, by skipping that trip to the Alamo, and that gave me the opportunity to get into some deep thought, right, and looking at the future and a little bit of my past and all of that, to come up with the concept for it. But it is about continuous transformation. And the enterprise of the future has to do three things well, or it won't be around. Okay, user architecture means you got to have one to fuse intelligent technologies with every aspect of the organization. Okay, recognize what I just said about the paradigm shifts. Recognize a paradigm shift or create a paradigm shift, and manage continuous transformation. Okay, so you need the framework to drive the architecture, and you've got to have that, or you don't know where you're going. You're just building individual stovepipe systems. So the point of the architecture is to capture the vision and the roadmap. Okay, the organization is the system, but the EA is the design of the organization. And EA is the glue. You may have heard that phrase before. It's the glue between strategy and execution. So when you talk about Bionic, like here's a couple of quick things about it. As I said, hyper-connected and all of that, but there's something I call the Bionic Enterprise singularity, which as it goes through several levels, but as it becomes more connected and it becomes more aware, it becomes more converged, and it becomes more intelligent. So at some point, the enterprise knows everything that's going on with all the people. You always hear the story about one organization working on like a proposal, another organization's working on a proposal. And neither of them know that this team over there has a capability that both teams or one of the teams might be envisioning or thinking about. Nobody knows everything that's going on. At some point, the AI will. We already have it summarizing our meetings or meeting notes, things like that. So imagine feeding all those meeting notes into the same instance of the AI on the platform, your AI platform. It knows about all the meetings going on everywhere and what was decided, who said what teams are looking at, what they're thinking about. You start to merge and fuse all that together. Now you've got a critical mass of understanding and knowledge of the enterprise that no one person has. Think about that. The ultimate collaborator. So when you talk about agents, there's a lot of little cute, graphics and things about what are agent workflows, things like that. But look at what the key elements of agents are at a conceptual level. There's an interface. It provides services. It has computational capabilities of some sort or another, right? It has an ontology. There's that word, ontology, of the domain that it operates in. It understands its world. That's what that's about, right? And then, it understands the structure of the information that it's working with. And, it has the data for that domain. It knows about its internal environment, and it knows, or its external environment, I should say, and it knows about its internal environment. And yet, that agent can communicate with other agents. I mean, I've got teams that are doing that right now. And really, you can set up explicit interfaces, but we also need to get to a point where these agents can discover other agents, and they can discover communities of agents, and they do what I call agent swarming, where they get together to solve a task. And that might just be temporary, and then they break back apart again, and then they swarm with others, they communicate with other teams to accomplish other tasks. Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's long-term, maybe it's permanent, right? So you have all these different agents that are communicating, and they're kind of out there like, hey, I need an agent that can do X and Y. And an agent raises its hand, like, hey, I know how to do that. Okay, now they're swarming, they're communicating. It's networking, like we do during the breaks, right? So there's a few of the key elements of it, and it describes, those components, like I just mentioned.
Close to wrapping. About 10 minutes over.
Okay. These are some of the key characteristics that agents have, which you don't normally see on LinkedIn. They talk about a few characteristics, but it really is about being persistent, autonomous, reactive and proactive. So when you're building your agents, think to yourself, am I really building these characteristics in there? Okay, there's your Bionic digital platform, which eventually is going to be populated with a bunch of agents that fit into all these various types of categories and subcategories and subcategories. And they start to form design patterns, like the one I was talking about, the smart flow system. It's kind of a common feedback loop for analysis and recommendation. And so we really begin with the user experience, and you go through the design process, and you develop something I refer to as a fusion strand, which kind of looks like this. It's the string of all those related elements and components that take you right down to the level of your particular tool to where you're building your application. right? You're coding something, whether it's coding or low coding or no coding, but it's about the human task and the bionic effects up at the top you're trying to achieve and the steps you go through to get there. So when you put together a series of fusion strands, so I turn them sideways, it can take a series of those to accomplish a number of tasks that are part of a particular human experience or user experience. Okay, so those are the things that you need, right? Don't build agents, architect the enterprise. Okay, and it needs to go across the organization. It's a matter of survival. As I said, you know, we have to develop sort of a bionic mindset and get used to paradigm shift and get used to continuous transformation. Technology's coming, robots are coming. Look at those numbers, right? So not just AI software on the screen, but you know what they call physical AI, like a Tesla. Okay, so it's about this vision. It's about this roadmap in all those different areas. Continuous transformation. You know, there's a roadmap process you can go through, you know, iteratively. So let me leave you with this. When you're designing your systems and your interfaces and you're integrating them and you're putting these components together, you know, and you're architecting hopefully, you know, agents to help you do that. Okay, when you're doing all this, take an enterprise perspective. Okay, you know, and think about the paradigm shift that happened at the Alamo, right? Back in 1836, but also in 2009, when the idea of the Bionic Enterprise kind of materialized, right? That's a paradigm shift there and a way of thinking about it. So ask yourself this: if your organization were to play Survivor Bionic Enterprise today, right, or your customer's organization, because if you don't do these things, I mean, this is critical for the future. The future is gonna kick you in the tail. If you don't do these things, you will get voted off the island. So how would your organization do in that? So now just quit playing around and get busy and get to work. Thank you.
So Kevin and I had, I've read Kevin's long book twice. I've read a shorter book multiple times because I use it for class. Kevin and I had a lot of long discussions and even some longer discussions. If you ever talk to Kevin, don't expect a short discussion.
Not sure how to take that, Warren.
No, it's good. But Kevin, I want to thank you.
Ran away, man. Hey, it's just I still need the picture.
Yeah, hold on to get a picture.
Sorry.
So thank you for making a trip to Orlando, thanks for this great keynote. Hopefully it inspired everybody. I know it inspired me. I always take something away every time we chat, and I appreciate you coming.
Likewise. Hope you guys got something out of it.
Very much so. Thank you.
This.
Thanks, Kevin.
Or you want that?